He lost his wife and newborn, and she lost her husband on the same day. With tears in his eyes, he whispered, "I want to be the father of your baby." Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to your own channel, Mr. Peter Stories. How are you, my beautiful family? Are you all doing fine? I hope you're staying strong and blessed, but today my heart is heavy because Binta is not well. Please, my beautiful family, keep her in your prayers. She misses you all so much, and I know your love and prayers will give her strength. A special prayer for my beautiful family. O Lord, the most merciful, the most loving, I lift up my beautiful family to you. For every woman facing sickness, I ask for healing. For every woman in pain, I ask for relief. For those feeling lost, I ask for your divine guidance. Wrap them in your love, protect them from harm, and fill their hearts with strength and peace. May every tear they shed be replaced with joy, and may every hardship turn into a testimony of victory. Amen. My beautiful family, if you are going through something right now, just know you are not alone. You are loved, you are strong, and you will rise above any challenge. Now I must clear something very important. I have only one channel, Mr. Peter Stories. More than 10 fake channels are trying to copy my style, using my voice, pretending to be me. But they are not me. My beautiful family, please don't be fooled by these scammers. Make sure you are only subscribed to Mr. Peter Stories, the one and only. So, my beautiful family, let's stand together. Like, share, and comment on this video to show your love and support. And always remember, this family is built on love, honesty, and unity. Let's start this video with love. Stay blessed, stay strong, and stay with Mr. Peter Stories.
Chapter 1. The Graveyard Meeting. The iron gates of Oakwood Cemetery creaked in protest as Thea Marlowe pushed them open with her shoulder, one arm cradling her infant son against her chest. A veil of mist hung over the grounds, softening the harsh reality of granite headstones and wilting flowers. The November air bit through her black wool coat as she navigated the winding path to the fresh grave in the eastern section. 30 days. 1 month since Callum's heart had failed him without warning, an aneurysm that struck while she delivered their son into the world. 1 month of sleepless nights, of answering condolences with hollow thanks, of searching for her husband's features in their newborn's face. She stopped before the temporary marker. Callum James Marlowe, beloved husband and father. The father part felt particularly cruel. He had held that title for mere minutes before it was severed from him forever. "I brought him to meet you," Thea whispered, shifting Elliot in her arms so the baby faced the grave. "He's getting bigger every day. The pediatrician says he's thriving." Thea's voice broke on the last word. Thriving. How could their son be thriving when his father lay cold in the ground? When his mother could barely remember to eat? The unfairness of it all crashed over her anew, and she sank to her knees on the damp earth, clutching Elliot tighter as tears escaped. "I don't know how to do this alone, Callum," she confessed to the silent stone. "Everything we planned, everything we dreamed about, it wasn't supposed to be just me." Elliot, disturbed by her shuddering breaths, or perhaps sensing her distress, began to wail, a sound that echoed off marble angels and granite crosses, amplifying her failure to comfort even her own child. She tried bouncing him gently, tried humming the lullaby that usually soothed him, but his cries grew more insistent. Her tears fell more freely now, mingling with the first drops of rain that had begun to fall. "Please," she begged, unsure who she was addressing, Callum, God, or the universe itself. "Please, I can't do this alone." The keening of another infant cut through Elliot's cries, startling Thea. She hadn't noticed anyone else in this section of the cemetery. Wiping her eyes hastily, she glanced around and spotted a tall figure several rows away, kneeling before a newer grave. A man, broad-shouldered in a charcoal overcoat, cradling what appeared to be a baby wrapped in pink. Something about the parallel sight, another parent bringing an infant to a fresh grave, momentarily halted her tears. Their shared circumstance felt like a cosmic cruelty, yet strangely comforting in its confirmation that she wasn't alone in this particular hell. As if sensing her gaze, the man looked up. For a breath, their eyes locked across the weathered headstones between them. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, of the same raw grief etched into the lines of their faces. Then Elliot's cries intensified. The man's baby joined the chorus, and the moment shattered. Thea returned her attention to her son, embarrassed by her public breakdown and the connection she'd imagined with a stranger. She fumbled with the diaper bag, searching for Elliot's pacifier, but her trembling hands scattered its contents across the wet grass. Formula, diapers, wipes, and the small stuffed lamb Callum had purchased before he died spilled out, instantly dampened by the increasing rainfall. "Here," a deep voice said, startling her. "Let me help." The man she'd noticed was suddenly beside her, balancing his own crying infant in one arm while offering her a handkerchief with his free hand. Up close, she noticed his eyes, hazel with flecks of gold, rimmed red from recent tears. "I'm sorry," she said automatically, accepting the handkerchief. "We're disturbing your visit." "No," he replied, his voice gentle. "I think I was disturbing yours. I recognize the sound of your grief. It matches my own." He gestured toward the grave he'd been visiting. "My wife, Nora. She died during childbirth exactly a month ago today." His voice caught slightly. "Hemorrhage. They couldn't stop the bleeding." The coincidence stole Thea's breath. "My husband, Callum," she responded, nodding toward the grave. "Aneurysm, while I was in delivery. 1 month ago today as well." They stood in silence as the rain intensified, the weight of their parallel tragedies hanging between them. Their babies continued crying, a duet of innocence untouched by knowledge of their losses. "I'm Archer," he said finally. "Archer Reed. And this is Dahlia, Thea Marlowe, and Elliot." She attempted to gather her scattered belongings one-handed, struggling as the rain plastered her hair to her face. "Here, let me," Archer offered, crouching to collect the items with his free hand. As he picked up the small stuffed lamb, his fingers lingered on it momentarily. "Did he choose this?" he asked quietly. Thea nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Somehow, this stranger had intuited the significance of that small toy, that it represented Callum's anticipation, his eager preparation for fatherhood. "I have a collection of fabric swatches at home," Archer confessed. "Nora was planning to make a quilt for Dahlia. I can't bring myself to put them away." The rain was falling in earnest now, dampening Elliot's blankets and causing Dahlia's pink cap to droop over her tiny forehead. Both babies' cries reached fever pitch. "We should get them somewhere dry," Archer said, handing Thea her belongings. "My car's just through the north gate. I could drive you home if you'd like." Under normal circumstances, Thea would never accept a ride from a stranger. But these circumstances were anything but normal, and something about Archer Reed's grief-etched face and gentle handling of his daughter spoke of safety rather than threat. "Thank you," she accepted. "That would be... thank you." As they walked side by side through the rows of graves, sheltering their infants as best they could from the intensifying storm, Thea felt something shift within her. Not healing, certainly not happiness, but perhaps the first fragile seedling of what might eventually become hope. In the small parking lot, Archer unlocked a practical gray SUV and helped her secure Elliot's carrier in the back seat before settling Dahlia in her own. Once they were in the dry warmth of the vehicle, an unexpected moment of awkwardness descended. "Where am I taking you?" Archer asked, his hands resting on the steering wheel. "The Marlowe estate on Hillcrest Avenue," Thea replied. "I've been staying with my mother-in-law since..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. As Archer navigated the winding roads leading from the cemetery, they fell into conversation that flowed with surprising ease. She learned he was an architectural designer who worked primarily from home, that Nora had been a wildlife photographer, that they'd been married for 5 years before deciding to start a family. She found herself sharing details of her own life, her work as a music teacher, Callum's career in publishing, their renovation of a small cottage they'd never get to raise their son in together. When they reached the imposing Victorian mansion where Marguerite Marlowe resided, Archer turned off the engine and reached into his wallet, extracting a business card. "If you ever need anything," he began, then paused, seeming to reconsider his words. "If you ever need to talk to someone who understands this specific situation, someone who won't offer platitudes or expect you to be moving on already." Thea accepted the card, their fingers brushing briefly. "Thank you, Archer Reed," she said softly, "for the ride, and for making me feel less alone, even if just for a moment." She gathered Elliot and her belongings, hurrying through the rain to the grand front door, unaware that this chance encounter in a cemetery would soon become the foundation of an unexpected second chance at love and life. Chapter 2. Rejection and Sanctuary. Thea pushed open the heavy oak door of Marguerite Marlowe's Victorian mansion, water dripping from her coat onto the immaculate marble foyer. The house was silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock, a silence that had become oppressive over the past month. Elliot squirmed in her arms, his face reddened from crying, his tiny fists balled against the damp blanket. "Is that you, Thea?" Marguerite's voice echoed from the drawing room, its cultured tones carrying their perpetual note of disapproval. "You're dripping water everywhere. Did you forget to take an umbrella again?" Before Thea could respond, she noticed the row of expensive leather suitcases arrayed at the foot of the grand staircase. She recognized them as her own, wedding gifts from Callum's family, used only once for their honeymoon to the Amalfi Coast. A cold dread settled in her stomach. Marguerite appeared in the hallway, her tall, slender figure impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, despite having no plans to leave the house. Her silver hair was pulled into a severe chignon, emphasizing the sharp angles of her face. At 62, she remained a striking woman, though grief had carved new lines around her mouth and between her brows. "What's all this?" Thea asked, though she already suspected the answer. Marguerite's gaze flickered over Elliot before settling coldly on Thea. "I've had your things packed. It's time for you to leave." The blunt statement, delivered without preamble, stunned Thea into momentary silence. "Leave? But I thought we agreed I would stay until—" "I've reconsidered," Marguerite interrupted, her voice brittle. "It's been a month. The initial shock has passed. I see no reason for you to continue living here." "Where am I supposed to go?" Thea asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Our cottage is rented out until spring, and I haven't been able to return to teaching yet. Elliot is barely a month old." "That's hardly my concern," Marguerite replied. "You have parents of your own, do you not? Or friends who could accommodate you? I've been more than generous allowing you to remain this long." Thea swallowed hard. Her parents lived overseas, teaching at an international school in Singapore. They had visited briefly after Callum's death, but couldn't extend their stay due to contractual obligations. As for friends, most had drifted away during her pregnancy, uncomfortable with her grief or unsure how to engage with the new widow. "Marguerite, please," Thea tried again, bouncing Elliot gently as he began to fuss. "Callum would want—" "Don't presume to tell me what my son would want." Marguerite's composure fractured, her voice rising sharply. "If not for this pregnancy, he might still be alive. The stress of impending fatherhood, the extra hours he worked to afford that ridiculous cottage renovation, it all contributed to his condition." The accusation struck Thea like a physical blow. That's not fair. The doctor said the aneurysm could have happened any time. It was a congenital weakness in the arterial wall, not stress or... Spare me the medical details, Marguerite cut in. I've heard them all. The fact remains that my son is dead, and every time I look at you and that child, I'm reminded of my loss. Elliot is your grandson, Thea said softly. He's part of Callum. He's the reason Callum pushed himself beyond his limits. Marguerite turned away, her shoulders rigid with contained emotion. I've arranged for a car service. It will arrive at 6 to take you wherever you wish to go. I suggest you use the intervening hours to make arrangements. It's already 4:30, Thea protested, glancing at the ornate wall clock. That's barely enough time to... I've been more than fair, Marguerite interrupted again. The rental income from the cottage has been deposited in your account, as per Callum's wishes. That should tide you over until you sort yourself out. With those words, she retreated to the drawing room, closing the double doors behind her with quiet finality. Thea stood in the foyer, water still dripping from her coat, her mind racing. The rental income from the cottage would cover perhaps 2 months in a modest apartment, but finding one on such short notice seemed impossible. Most of her savings had gone into the renovation, a project they'd begun with such hope. Elliot began to cry in earnest, hungry after their cemetery visit. Thea carried him upstairs to what had been their temporary bedroom. The space was now stripped of personal touches, no photographs on the dresser, no books on the nightstand, only the essential baby items and her packed luggage remaining. She settled into the armchair by the window, opening her blouse to feed Elliot. As he nursed, she pulled out her phone and began making desperate calls. Her best friend from college was traveling for work. Another friend had just had twins and barely had room for her own family. The few remaining options voiced sympathy, but offered only vague promises to ask around. The minutes ticked by with alarming speed. As the grandfather clock downstairs chimed 5:30, Thea felt panic rising in her throat. She had nowhere to go, a newborn to care for, and less than 30 minutes before the car arrived. In her desperation, she found herself staring at the business card Archer Reed had given her earlier. She traced her finger over the embossed lettering. Archer Reed, Architectural Design, and the phone number beneath. He had offered help if she needed it, but surely he hadn't meant something of this magnitude. They were strangers connected by nothing more than parallel tragedies. Still, as the minutes continued to slip away, she found herself with diminishing options. With trembling fingers, she dialed his number, unsure what she would say if he answered. After 4 rings, she was about to hang up when his deep voice came through the line. Archer Reed. "It's Thea," she said, her voice smaller than she intended. "Thea Marlowe, from the cemetery earlier." "Thea," he repeated, surprise evident in his tone. "Is everything all right?" The simple question broke something inside her. "No," she admitted, tears threatening again. "Everything is very much not all right." She explained her situation in halting sentences, embarrassment coloring her words. "I wouldn't ask, but I literally have nowhere else to go tonight. Maybe tomorrow I can figure something out, but with Elliot, I just..." "Where are you now?" Archer interrupted, his voice calm and decisive. "Still at my mother-in-law's, but not for much longer." "I'm coming to get you," he said without hesitation. "Text me the address. Pack whatever you and Elliot need for tonight. We have a guest suite that hasn't been used in months." "Are you sure?" Thea asked, relief and doubt warring within her. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Archer replied simply. "You're a mother with an infant who needs shelter for the night. The rest we can figure out tomorrow." When Thea hung up, she felt a curious mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Accepting help from a virtual stranger went against every cautionary instinct, yet something about Archer Reed inspired trust. Perhaps it was the shared experience of their losses, or the gentle way he'd handled his daughter. Whatever the reason, his offer represented her only viable option. She dressed Elliot in warm clothes and packed a diaper bag with essentials. The rest would have to remain in storage until she found permanent lodging. As she zipped the final bag, a text arrived from Archer, 10 minutes away. Thea carried Elliot and her overnight bag downstairs. Marguerite emerged from the drawing room at the sound of her footsteps, a flicker of surprise crossing her features. "You've found accommodations already?" she asked, eyeing the single bag. "Yes," Thea replied, unwilling to elaborate. "The rest of my things can remain here temporarily," Marguerite conceded, a hint of discomfort in her expression. Perhaps she hadn't expected Thea to solve her housing crisis so quickly. "I'll have them moved to the garage. You can arrange to collect them when you're settled." A car pulled into the circular driveway, its headlights illuminating the rain-slicked cobblestones. Thea recognized Archer's gray SUV. "Your car service is early," Marguerite observed, moving to peer through the side window. "It's not a service," Thea said, gathering her courage. "It's a friend." Marguerite's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see." For a moment, Thea thought she detected a flicker of concern in her mother-in-law's expression, perhaps worry that she'd acted too hastily, but it vanished quickly, replaced by the same cool detachment that had characterized their interactions since Callum's death. "Goodbye, Marguerite," Thea said, shifting Elliot to her shoulder. "I'll contact you about visiting arrangements with Elliot once I'm settled." "That won't be necessary," Marguerite replied stiffly. "I'll have my solicitor draw up a formal visitation schedule." Thea nodded, too exhausted for further confrontation. She stepped into the rain without Marguerite offering to help with her bag or to say goodbye to her grandson. The door closed behind her with a definitive click before she reached the bottom step. Archer emerged from the driver's side, an umbrella in hand. He met her halfway up the path, sheltering her and Elliot from the downpour as he took her bag. His face registered concern, but he asked no questions, simply guided her to the passenger seat and ensured she and Elliot were settled before loading her bag. As they pulled away from the Marlowe estate, Thea watched the imposing house recede in the side mirror, its windows glowing with warm light that belied the coldness within. She felt Archer's gaze on her profile, but kept her eyes fixed on the diminishing image. "Thank you," she said finally, when the house had disappeared around a bend. "I know this is imposing terribly, but I promise it's just for tonight." "Let's not worry about time frames right now," Archer replied, his focus returning to the rain-slicked road. "You and Elliot need a safe place. I have room. The rest can be sorted out when you've had a chance to breathe." As they drove through the darkening evening toward his home, Thea felt the weight of the day pressing down on her. Yet, beneath the exhaustion and uncertainty, a small ember of something like hope flickered to life. For the first time since Callum's death, someone had offered help without obligation or judgment. A simple human kindness when she needed it most. She glanced at Archer's profile, illuminated briefly by passing streetlights. What twist of fate had placed him in the cemetery at the exact moment she'd needed someone to witness her grief? And what further coincidence had made him available when she found herself homeless hours later? The questions swirled in her mind as they continued toward an unknown future, the windshield wipers keeping steady rhythm like a metronome, counting beats in a composition yet to be written. Chapter 3. The Oppressive Household. Archer's SUV cut through sheets of rain, windshield wipers working furiously as they navigated the winding road toward the outskirts of town. Thea cradled Elliot against her chest, her mind still reeling from Marguerite's abrupt eviction. The baby had finally succumbed to exhaustion, his tiny features peaceful in sleep despite the tumult surrounding his young life. "We're almost there," Archer said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "Just beyond those trees." Thea followed his gesture to where a modern farmhouse emerged through the downpour, its warm lights glowing like beacons against the darkening sky. The structure blended traditional elements with contemporary design, clearly the work of an architect with an appreciation for history. "It's beautiful," she murmured, taking in the clean lines and thoughtful proportions. "Thank you," Archer replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "It was my first major renovation project. Nora and I bought it as a dilapidated farmhouse 6 years ago. We lived in the barn conversion during the reconstruction." His voice softened at the mention of his late wife, but Thea noticed he spoke her name without the raw pain she still felt when mentioning Callum. They pulled into a circular driveway and Archer cut the engine. "Wait here," he instructed, grabbing an umbrella from the back seat. He circled the vehicle and opened her door, sheltering Thea and Elliot as they made their way to the covered porch. Before Archer could reach for his keys, the front door swung open. A tall, elegant woman in her early 60s stood in the entryway, her silver blonde hair cut in a sleek bob that accentuated her aristocratic features. She wore tailored black trousers and a cashmere sweater, an outfit too formal for a quiet evening at home. Her attention fixed immediately on Thea and the bundle in her arms. "Archer, you're late. Dahlia has been—" She broke off, her gray eyes narrowing. "Who is this?" "Mother, this is Thea Marlowe and her son Elliot," Archer explained, ushering Thea into the warm foyer. "Thea, this is my mother, Victoria Reed." Victoria's posture stiffened further, if that were possible. "I see. And what is Ms. Marlowe doing in our home at this hour?" Thea felt heat rise to her cheeks, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance and the awkwardness of the situation. Before she could formulate a response, Archer spoke. "Thea needs a place to stay tonight. She and Elliot will be using the guest suite." His tone was firm, brooking no argument, though his expression remained neutral. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," she suggested, her gaze sliding dismissively over Thea. "There's nothing to discuss," Archer replied, taking Thea's overnight bag from her shoulder. "Thea, let me show you to your room. You must be exhausted." He guided her toward a hallway off the main living area, leaving Victoria standing rigidly in the foyer. Thea could feel the older woman's disapproving gaze boring into her back. The guest suite occupied a private wing of the house, separated from the main living areas by a short corridor. Archer opened the door to reveal a spacious room with a queen-sized bed, a comfortable sitting area, and an ensuite bathroom. The decor was understated but elegant, cream walls, navy accents, and warm wood tones. "The bathroom has everything you should need," Archer explained, setting her bag on a luggage rack. "There's a mini fridge under the console table with water and snacks. For Elliot," he hesitated, then moved to a closet, retrieving a portable bassinet. "We bought this for when Nora's sister visited with her baby last year. It should work for tonight." Thea's throat tightened at this unexpected thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she managed. "This is more than generous." Archer ran a hand through his damp hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of discomfort. "I should check on Dahlia. She's probably giving my mother a hard time." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Are you hungry?" "I could bring something once you're settled." "I'm fine, really," Thea assured him, though she couldn't remember when she'd last eaten. "You've done more than enough." He nodded, seeming reluctant to leave. "If you need anything, my room is at the end of the main hallway. Just make yourself at home, okay?" After Archer left, Thea stood in the center of the room, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events. She gently laid Elliot in the bassinet, changed into dry clothes, and sat on the edge of the bed. Exhaustion crashed over her in waves, but her racing mind prevented sleep. What was she doing here, in a stranger's home, with her infant son? How had her life unraveled so completely in just 30 days? She pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back tears. She couldn't afford another breakdown. Elliot needed her to be strong, to make rational decisions. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Expecting Archer, she was surprised to find Victoria in the doorway, holding a tray with a steaming bowl of soup and a slice of bread. "You should eat something," the older woman said stiffly, placing the tray on the console table. Her gaze drifted to Elliot sleeping in the bassinet, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," Thea replied, unsure how to navigate this tentative olive branch. Victoria remained by the door, making no move to leave. "How did you meet my son?" she asked abruptly. The question carried undercurrents of suspicion that Thea didn't miss. "At the cemetery, actually. This afternoon. We were both visiting our spouses." She stumbled over the final word. "I see," Victoria's gaze sharpened. "And within hours you've managed to secure an invitation to our home." Heat flooded Thea's cheeks. "It wasn't like that. My mother-in-law asked me to leave, and I had nowhere else to go. Archer offered the guest room for tonight. I'll be looking for an apartment tomorrow." Victoria studied her with clinical detachment. "My son is vulnerable right now, Ms. Marlowe. His judgment may be impaired by grief. I hope you understand that." The implication was clear. Victoria viewed her as a potential threat, perhaps even an opportunist. Under different circumstances, Thea might have been offended. Instead, she felt an unexpected flood of empathy. Victoria was protecting her son, just as Thea would protect Elliot from perceived threats. "I understand your concern," Thea said quietly. "Archer has been extraordinarily kind, offering shelter to someone he barely knows. I promise I have no intention of taking advantage of that kindness." Victoria's expression remained skeptical. "My son has a generous heart, sometimes too generous." She moved toward the door, then paused. "You should know that Archer is still deeply in love with Nora. Her death hasn't changed that fact." "I wouldn't expect it to," Thea replied, meeting the older woman's gaze steadily. "Just as my husband's death hasn't changed my love for him." Something flickered in Victoria's eyes, perhaps surprise at Thea's directness or reluctant recognition of a shared understanding. Without another word, she turned and left, closing the door softly behind her. That night, both babies woke simultaneously around midnight. Thea emerged from the guest suite with Elliot to find Archer in the kitchen, attempting to prepare a bottle for Dahlia with one hand while holding his fussing daughter in the other. "Need help?" Thea offered, adjusting Elliot against her shoulder. Archer looked up, relief evident in his expression. "Please, I'm still mastering the one-handed bottle preparation." Thea took Dahlia from him with practiced ease, balancing both infants as Archer efficiently prepared 2 bottles. The domestic scene felt surprisingly natural despite their short acquaintance, 2 new parents helping each other through the challenging nighttime hours. "Your mother thinks I'm taking advantage of your vulnerability," Thea said as they settled at the kitchen island, each feeding a baby. Archer's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Victoria is protective by nature. She moved in after Nora died to help with Dahlia, but her assistance comes with strong opinions attached." "She loves you," Thea observed. "She's afraid you'll be hurt again." "Perhaps," Archer acknowledged, "but she forgets that I'm an adult capable of making my own decisions." He glanced at Thea. "I hope her concerns didn't make you uncomfortable." "No more than this entire situation already has," Thea replied with unexpected honesty. "I never imagined being homeless with a 1-month-old, dependent on a stranger's kindness." "We're not exactly strangers anymore," Archer pointed out gently. "Not after today." The simple observation resonated with Thea. Their shared grief had accelerated intimacy that might otherwise have taken months to develop. There was something about parallel tragedy that created immediate understanding words couldn't adequately express. Chapter 4. Rhythm and Routine. Morning arrived with soft golden light filtering through unfamiliar curtains. Thea woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting the previous day's upheaval. The luxurious guest bed with its crisp linens was a stark contrast to the austere room she'd occupied at Marguerite's house. For a fleeting moment, she imagined Callum beside her, the past month merely a nightmare from which she'd finally awakened. Reality reasserted itself when Elliot's hungry cries pierced the silence. Thea glanced at her watch. 6:17 a.m., a full hour longer than her son typically allowed her to sleep. She lifted him from the bassinet, noting with surprise that his diaper was fresh. Someone had changed him during the night without waking her. After feeding Elliot, Thea dressed in her only clean outfit and ventured cautiously into the main part of the house. The kitchen was empty but showed signs of recent activity. A coffee pot half full, a bottle soaking in the sink. She found a note propped against a mug on the counter, written in an architect's precise hand. "Help yourself to breakfast. Working in my studio behind the house. V has taken Dahlia to her morning appointment." A star. The absence of Victoria's intimidating presence allowed Thea to breathe more freely. She prepared a simple breakfast of toast and fruit, then settled at the kitchen island with Elliot in her lap to make calls about apartment rentals. The first 3 agencies had nothing immediately available that met her modest budget. The fourth suggested a basement unit that wouldn't be ready for 3 weeks. "Problem?" Archer's voice startled her as he entered through the back door. He wore jeans and a paint-spattered Henley, a pencil tucked behind his ear. "Housing options are limited," Thea admitted, ending her call. "Especially ones that don't require first and last month's rent, plus security deposit up front." Archer nodded, pouring himself coffee. "The rental market here is brutal. Took Nora and me 6 months to find this place, and it was barely habitable then." He leaned against the counter, studying her. "There's no rush, you know. The guest suite is yours for as long as you need it." Thea shook her head. "Your mother made it quite clear last night that my presence isn't welcome." "My mother doesn't decide who stays in my home," Archer replied, his tone firm but not unkind. "She moved in temporarily after Nora died to help with Dahlia. I appreciate her support, but that doesn't give her authority over household decisions." Before Thea could respond, Elliot began to fuss. She bounced him gently, but his complaints intensified. "May I?" Archer asked, setting down his coffee. Surprised, Thea handed over her son. Archer cradled Elliot with practiced ease, speaking to him in the soft, slightly elevated tone that seemed instinctive when addressing infants. Elliot's cries subsided almost immediately as he studied this new face with solemn curiosity. "He likes you," Thea observed, watching her son grasp Archer's finger. "We understand each other," Archer replied with a small smile. "Fellow travelers on the same journey." He returned his attention to Thea. "Here's a suggestion. Stay through the weekend. Use my home office to make calls and search for apartments without Victoria hovering. By Monday, you'll either have found suitable accommodation or we can revisit this conversation." The practical proposal made sense, yet Thea hesitated. "I don't want to create tension between you and your mother." "That tension existed long before you arrived," Archer assured her. "Victoria and I have complicated history, but we're both adults capable of managing our disagreements." He handed Elliot back, their fingers brushing momentarily during the transfer. "In the meantime, 2 single parents helping each other hardly seems controversial." Something in his tone, a blend of determination and vulnerability, weakened Thea's resistance. "Through the weekend," she agreed cautiously, "and I insist on contributing somehow. Cooking, cleaning, whatever would be helpful." "Deal," Archer replied, his expression lightening. "Though I should warn you I'm a decent cook, but a terrible housekeeper. The opportunity for improvement is substantial." The rest of the day established a pattern that would sustain them through subsequent weeks. While Archer worked in his studio, Thea tackled the kitchen, bringing order to the chaos of a house managed by a grieving father and his well-meaning but domestically challenged mother. She discovered forgotten groceries in the refrigerator and transformed them into a hearty soup that simmered throughout the afternoon, filling the house with comforting aromas. Victoria returned with Dahlia shortly before dinner, her expression souring when she found Thea settled at the kitchen island, laptop open to apartment listings while Elliot napped nearby. "Still here, I see," she observed coolly. "Mother," Archer's warning tone preceded his entrance from the back hallway. "Thea is staying through the weekend while she arranges more permanent housing." Victoria's lips thinned in disapproval, but she refrained from direct confrontation. Instead, she focused on Dahlia, who had begun to fuss in her carrier. "She's overtired," Victoria announced. "I'll take her upstairs for her nap." "Actually," Archer countered, lifting his daughter with gentle confidence, "it's past her feeding time. I'll handle it." As Victoria swept from the room, radiating displeasure, Thea busied herself with the soup to avoid acknowledging the tension. Archer settled at the table with Dahlia, expertly balancing her while preparing a bottle. "Sorry about that," he said once Victoria's footsteps had faded. "She's always been protective, but Nora's death has intensified that tendency." "She loves you," Thea replied, stirring the soup thoughtfully. "She's afraid you'll be hurt again." Archer tested the formula temperature with practiced efficiency. "Perhaps, but she's forgetting that I'm 32, not 16. I'm capable of making my own decisions, including who I welcome into my home." That evening established another pattern: dinner shared at the kitchen island after the babies were settled, conversations flowing more easily than either expected. Thea learned that Archer had studied architecture at Cornell, that he specialized in restoring historic properties while incorporating sustainable elements, that he and Nora had met during a renovation project at the Wildlife Conservation Center where she volunteered. In turn, she shared her background in music education, her childhood in Vermont, how she'd met Callum at a publishing conference where she was pitching a children's songbook. These exchanges, initially tentative, gradually built a foundation of comfortable familiarity between them. By Sunday evening, Thea had secured a promising lead on an apartment, though it wouldn't be available for 3 weeks. She was preparing to announce this development to Archer when Victoria intervened with unexpected directness. "I've been thinking," she began over dinner, her tone suspiciously accommodating. "It seems wasteful for Thea to take temporary accommodation when we have perfectly adequate space here." She smiled thinly. "And I must admit, the house has been more organized since her arrival." Archer and Thea exchanged startled glances. "That's surprisingly generous, Mother," Archer said cautiously. "Well," Victoria continued, cutting her food with precise movements, "it makes practical sense. Thea needs housing. We need assistance with household management, and the babies seem to do better with consistent routines." Her gaze fixed on Thea. "I propose an arrangement. Room and board in exchange for household management until you secure permanent housing. Strictly business, of course." The offer, though couched in practical terms, represented a significant shift from Victoria's previous hostility. Thea suspected ulterior motives. Perhaps Victoria preferred to keep potential threats where she could monitor them, but the arrangement would solve her immediate housing crisis. "That's very kind," Thea replied carefully, "but I wouldn't want to impose further." "It's hardly an imposition if you're providing a service in exchange," Victoria countered smoothly. "And it would allow you to save the money you'd otherwise spend on temporary accommodations. I assume finances are concerning at present." The pointed reference to her financial vulnerability stung, but Thea kept her expression neutral. "I'll consider it, thank you." Later, after Victoria retired, Archer found Thea in the kitchen preparing bottles for the night. "You don't have to accept my mother's offer," he said without preamble. Her delivery was tactless, but the core idea has merit. This arrangement has been working, hasn't it? Thea considered the past 3 days, the surprising ease with which they developed complementary routines, the quiet companionship of shared meals, the relief of having another adult who understood the unique challenges they both faced. It has, she acknowledged, but I don't want charity. It's not charity if you're contributing, Archer countered, echoing his mother's point in a gentler tone. You've brought order to a house that desperately needed it. You've cooked actual meals instead of the takeout we've subsisted on. And, he hesitated, vulnerability flickering across his features, having someone around who understands this specific type of grief without needing explanations, that's valuable beyond measure. His honesty disarmed her final reservations. All right, she agreed. A temporary arrangement until I find something permanent, and I insist on contributing to groceries and utilities. Deal, Archer replied, relief evident in his expression. Though I should warn you, Victoria doesn't relinquish kitchen territory easily. Prepare for ongoing negotiations regarding meal preparation. His attempt at humor lightened the moment, but as Thea returned to her guest suite later that evening, she couldn't help wondering if she'd made a wise decision. The practical benefits were undeniable, yet she sensed invisible boundary lines being redrawn, relationships shifting in ways neither she nor Archer had anticipated. As she settled Elliot for the night, Thea realized with startling clarity that for the first time since Callum's death, she had spent an entire day without being ambushed by crippling grief. The constant ache remained, the absence still profound, but something had changed, a microscopic shift in the weight she carried, as if someone had silently lifted a fraction of her burden without her noticing. Chapter 5. Whispers and Judgments. 2 weeks into their arrangement, Thea pushed Elliot's stroller through Meadowbrook's Central Park, enjoying the crisp autumn air. The temporary solution had evolved into a functional routine with surprising ease. Mornings began with shared coffee while the babies napped. Afternoons found Thea managing household affairs while Archer worked in his studio. Evenings centered around jointly prepared meals, after which they often sat in comfortable silence, each with their respective infant, occasionally sharing observations about their day. Victoria maintained a cool civility, neither welcoming nor openly hostile, though her calculating gaze followed Thea's every interaction with Archer. The older woman had departed that morning for a 3-day Garden Society conference, leaving them to manage alone for the first time since Thea's arrival. Thea Marlowe. The uncertain voice pulled her from her thoughts. Andrea Collins, a fellow music teacher from Meadowbrook Elementary, approached with tentative steps. They'd been friendly colleagues, though never close friends. Andrea, hello, Thea greeted her with a genuine smile. Human connection beyond the Reed household felt suddenly precious. I heard about Callum, Andrea said, her expression softening with sympathy. I've been meaning to reach out, but I wasn't sure. She trailed off, glancing at Elliot. Is this your little one? Yes, this is Elliot, Thea confirmed, pride momentarily displacing grief as she adjusted the blanket around her son. He's just turned 7 weeks. Andrea bent to admire the baby, making appropriate cooing sounds before straightening with an awkward shift in demeanor. We've all been wondering how you're doing. There have been stories. The hesitation in her tone alerted Thea to underlying gossip. Stories? Andrea glanced around before leaning closer. About your living situation. Marguerite Marlowe has been rather vocal at her garden club meetings about you moving in with another man so soon after Callum's passing. Heat flashed across Thea's face. That's not. I'm staying temporarily with a friend while looking for an apartment. Marguerite asked me to leave her home rather abruptly. Of course, Andrea said quickly, though her expression remained dubious. It's just, well, people talk in a small town like this, And when they heard you were living with Archer Reed—" She paused meaningfully. "You know Archer?" Thea asked, surprised by the connection. "Everyone knows of him," Andrea corrected. "His wife's death during childbirth was tragic news. The timing of your arrangement has raised eyebrows." The implication was unmistakable. Marguerite had twisted her temporary housing situation into something sordid, and the town had eagerly consumed the gossip. Thea felt simultaneously exposed and defensive. "Archer offered his guest suite when I had nowhere else to go," she explained, striving for dignity. "We're two grieving parents helping each other survive an impossible situation. Nothing more." "Of course," Andrea repeated, her tone suggesting the opposite. "Well, I should let you continue your walk. Give Elliot a kiss from his Auntie Andrea." She squeezed Thea's arm. "And don't worry about the talk. People will find something new to discuss eventually." As Andrea walked away, Thea remained rooted to the path, her earlier peace shattered. She'd been naively focused on day-to-day survival, oblivious to how their arrangement might appear to outsiders. Worse, she hadn't considered how such gossip might affect Archer, who had business relationships throughout the community. Similar uncomfortable encounters punctuated her afternoon errands. At the grocery store, conversations halted when she approached certain aisles. The pharmacist's assistant gave her a disapproving look when she purchased items for both Elliot and Dahlia. By the time she returned to Archer's house—no, not his house, she corrected herself mentally, her temporary residence— Thea's emotions had crystallized from embarrassment to indignation. She found Archer in the kitchen, attempting to prepare dinner with Dahlia strapped to his chest. The domestic scene, normally comforting in its routine, now carried new implications after the day's revelations. "You're back late," he observed, glancing up from dicing vegetables. "Everything okay?" Thea settled Elliot's carrier on the counter before unpacking groceries with unnecessary force. "Did you know the entire town is gossiping about us?" Archer's knife paused mid-chop. "Ah, you've had the pleasure of Meadowbrook's rumor mill." "You knew?" Thea's voice rose slightly, causing Elliot to stir. She lowered her tone. "Why didn't you warn me?" "What exactly would I have warned you about?" Archer asked reasonably. "That people with empty lives fill them by dissecting others. That grief makes people uncomfortable, but scandal provides entertainment." His calm response deflated Thea's indignation. "I just felt blindsided," she admitted. "Andrea Collins implied we're having some torrid affair, as if we've both forgotten our spouses after only weeks." Archer resumed chopping, his rhythm deliberately measured. "Does it matter what they think?" "Of course it matters," Thea exclaimed. "Your reputation, your business." "My reputation is built on my work, not town gossip," Archer interrupted gently. "Anyone whose opinion matters knows exactly why you're staying here." "But it's not fair to you," Thea persisted. "You offered shelter to someone in need, and now people are questioning your character." Archer set down his knife and faced her directly. "Thea, I lost my wife 7 weeks ago. Town gossip ranks extremely low on my list of concerns right now." His expression softened. "But if it bothers you, I understand. We can reconsider the arrangement." The thought of leaving, of facing apartment hunting alone, of returning to isolated grieving, sent an unexpected wave of panic through Thea. These past weeks, for all their challenges, had provided structure and human connection when she needed it most. "No," she said quietly, "unless you want me to go." "I don't," he replied, the simple declaration hanging between them. After a pause, he added, "Whatever this arrangement is, it's working for us. For the babies. That's what matters." They prepared dinner side by side, the earlier tension dissolving into familiar rhythm. Later, after the babies were settled, they sat in the living room with cups of tea, the evening silence comfortable until Archer broke it unexpectedly. "I should have warned you about Marguerite," he said. She's been spreading versions of her narrative since she saw us together at the pharmacy last week. Thea looked up sharply. You saw her? Archer nodded. She made her disapproval quite clear, suggesting I was taking advantage of your vulnerable state. His mouth quirked in a humorless smile. Apparently, we're quite the scandal. Two grieving spouses finding inappropriate comfort together. That's ridiculous, Thea said automatically, though something in his tone caused warmth to rise to her cheeks. They hadn't discussed the nature of their relationship beyond its practical aspects, both carefully avoiding acknowledgement of the growing comfort they found in each other's presence. Is it? Archer asked softly. The question hung between them, charged with unspoken possibility. Thea found herself suddenly aware of details she'd been subconsciously cataloging, the way firelight caught gold flecks in his hazel eyes, how his fingers moved with architectural precision, whether handling blueprints or cradling dahlia, the low timbre of his voice when speaking late at night. I don't know, she admitted finally. I know it's too soon to even consider anything. I still reach for Callum in my sleep. And I still save articles Nora would find interesting, Archer acknowledged. We're still married to ghosts. The frank assessment should have created distance, but instead fostered unexpected intimacy, the shared understanding that neither sought to replace what they'd lost, merely to survive what remained. The moment was interrupted by Dahlia's cries through the baby monitor. Archer rose, his hand briefly resting on Thea's shoulder as he passed. A touch that might have been casual reassurance, but lingered just long enough to suggest something more. Alone, Thea confronted feelings she'd been avoiding. Whatever was developing between them defied simple categorization. Not romance in any conventional sense, but something equally powerful. A connection forged in parallel grief, in shared responsibility, in mutual understanding too rare to dismiss. Chapter 6. Memory boxes. The anniversary of Nora's death approached with the subtlety of an oncoming storm. Archer grew quieter, his focus drifting during conversations, his gaze lingering on photographs Thea had carefully maintained throughout the house. After 2 months of cautious cohabitation, she recognized the signs of grief resurfacing with renewed intensity. One evening, Archer disappeared after dinner without explanation. When he hadn't returned after Thea settled both babies for the night, concern drove her to search the house. She found his studio door ajar, soft lamplight spilling onto the hallway floor. She hesitated at the threshold, reluctant to intrude on private grief. Through the gap, she could see Archer seated on the floor, surrounded by photographs, trinkets, and handwritten notes. His shoulders curved inward, head bowed over what appeared to be a wooden box with brass hinges. Archer, she called softly, knocking gently on the doorframe. He looked up, eyes reddened but dry. Sorry, he said, attempting to gather the scattered items. I lost track of time. Don't apologize. Thea remained in the doorway, respecting the boundary. I was just worried. Archer gestured for her to enter. I'm making a memory box for Dahlia, he explained as Thea approached cautiously. Tomorrow would have been Nora's 31st birthday. The revelation explained his recent withdrawal. Thea knelt beside him, taking in the collection, a pressed wildflower, ticket stubs, a beaded bracelet, photographs of a vibrant woman with Archer's same warm smile. Nora believed in documenting everything, Archer continued, lifting a small journal with worn edges. She kept these detailed nature journals on every hike, every wildlife sighting. I want Dahlia to know her mother was more than just, his voice caught, more than just someone who died bringing her into the world. She'll know, Thea assured him, carefully lifting a photograph of Nora cradling her pregnant belly, face radiant with expectation. Through your stories, through these treasures. Archer traced the edge of a train ticket with his fingertip. Our first date was a day trip to the White Mountains. She packed this ridiculous gourmet picnic, but forgot utensils. We ended up eating pâté with tree bark as makeshift spoons. The memory drew a reluctant smile. She said it added authentic terroir. The intimate story created a momentary awkwardness. Thea felt simultaneously privileged to receive this confidence and concerned about intruding on sacred memories. But Archer's expression held invitation rather than regret, as if sharing these recollections lightened their weight. "Tell me more about her," Thea said gently. For the next hour, photographs and mementos became portals to Nora's life. Her passion for tracking endangered birds, her terrible cooking despite ambitious attempts, her habit of singing off-key in the shower. With each story, Archer's posture relaxed, grief transforming from jagged pain to bittersweet remembrance. She would have been an incredible mother, he concluded, placing a small watercolor of mountain laurel into the box. That's the cruelest part. Dahlia lost someone irreplaceable before ever knowing her. But she has you, Thea reminded him, and you carry Nora with you in everything you do with Dahlia. Archer met her gaze, vulnerability naked in his expression. Some days I worry I'm already forgetting details. The exact pitch of her laugh, the specific way she'd wrinkle her nose when concentrating. What if Dahlia asks questions someday that I can't answer? The fear struck a chord in Thea's heart. She'd had similar thoughts about Elliot. How much of Callum would remain in her memory as years passed? What essential qualities might fade, leaving her son with an incomplete portrait of his father? I should start something similar for Elliot, she mused, fingering the edge of a photograph. Before memories begin to blur. I have extra boxes, Archer offered immediately. From my restoration salvage collection, there's a mahogany one with mother-of-pearl inlay that would be perfect. His enthusiasm sparked an unexpected project. They relocated to the dining room table, where Archer produced the promised box. Indeed, perfect, with smooth corners and a subtle sheen. Thea retrieved the small collection of mementos she'd managed to salvage from Marguerite's house, Callum's favorite fountain pen, the sonogram from their first ultrasound, the small lamb-stuffed animal he'd purchased the day they learned Elliot was a boy. They worked side by side, Archer organizing his collection while Thea began hers, occasionally sharing stories that revealed the essence of the people they'd loved and lost. The parallel activity created intimacy without pressure, allowing grief to exist alongside tentative joy in preserving these memories for their children. Callum collected vintage book plates, Thea explained, displaying a small leather portfolio. He'd spend hours in antique shops looking for them. Most people thought it was an odd hobby, but he loved the history, imagining all the different hands that had touched these books through decades. Nora would have appreciated that, Archer replied. She had a similar fascination with bird migration patterns, how certain routes had remained unchanged for centuries despite human development. Connections across time. As midnight approached, their collection of stories had created a bridge between past and present, between respective losses that neither could fully comprehend, but both could honor. When they finally packed away the boxes, something had shifted between them. A deepened understanding, a shared purpose beyond daily survival. At the hallway junction where they typically parted for the night, Archer paused. "Thank you," he said simply, "for understanding why this matters." "Of course it matters," Thea replied. "They matter. Always will." Without premeditation, Archer leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, brief, chaste, yet startling in its intimacy. He stepped back immediately, uncertainty flickering across his features. "I'm sorry," he began. "I didn't mean to—" "It's okay," Thea interrupted, though her pulse had quickened unexpectedly. "We're friends. Friends comfort each other." The word friends hung between them, simultaneously accurate and insufficient to describe what they had become to each other. Neither moved to close the physical gap again, yet something had been acknowledged, the possibility that their connection might evolve beyond parallel grief and practical arrangement. "Good night, Thea," Archer finally said, retreating toward his bedroom. "Good night," she echoed, watching him go before turning toward the guest suite that had begun to feel increasingly like home. Inside her room, as she checked on sleeping Elliot, Thea confronted the complex emotions Archer's simple gesture had awakened. Not betrayal of Callum's memory as she might have expected, but rather guilt at its absence. Shouldn't she have felt wrong accepting affection from another man so soon after losing her husband? Why instead had it felt like a natural extension of the connection they'd built? The memory of Callum remained vivid, her love for him undiminished. Yet alongside that enduring attachment, something new had taken root, respect and affection for Archer that existed not in competition with her feelings for Callum, but parallel to them, as if her heart had developed separate chambers for past and present. Chapter 7. First Steps Forward. 3 months after their chance meeting in the cemetery, Thea and Archer established a rhythm that blended practicality with growing affection. Their arrangement had evolved beyond mere cohabitation into something neither had anticipated, a partnership that honored their past losses while nurturing tentative hope for the future. Victoria had departed a week earlier, returning to her own home across town after acknowledging that her constant presence was no longer necessary. Though her disapproval of their evolving relationship remained evident in her parting remark that she would return when things had been properly sorted, her absence allowed a subtle shift in household dynamics, casual touches lingering a moment longer, conversations extending into the night, shared laughter no longer muted by concern for external judgment. On a crisp December morning, Thea entered the kitchen to find Archer preparing breakfast. One-handed, Dahlia secured against his chest in a carrier. The domestic tableau, his hair still damp from the shower, sleeves rolled to expose forearms dusted with light hair, confident movements as he flipped pancakes, stirred an appreciation that transcended gratitude. "Morning," he greeted her, a smile warming his features. "Coffee's ready." Thea poured herself a cup, inhaling the rich aroma. "You're up early," she observed, noting the stack of pancakes already waiting. "Special occasion." "Today marks 3 months since we met," Archer replied without looking up from the stove. "Seemed worth acknowledging." The casual commemoration caught Thea by surprise. She hadn't tracked the date, yet Archer had, a detail that spoke volumes about his attention to their evolving connection. 3 months, she echoed softly. "Sometimes it feels much longer." "In grief time, maybe it is," he suggested, transferring the final pancake to the stack. "We've compressed years of ordinary friendship into weeks of extraordinary circumstances." The assessment felt accurate. Their shared experiences, parallel loss, new parenthood, navigating judgment, had accelerated intimacy that might otherwise have developed over years. As they settled at the kitchen island, Elliot still sleeping in his bassinet nearby, Thea considered how profoundly her life had transformed since that rainy day in the cemetery. "I have something for you," Archer said, sliding a small wrapped package across the counter. "Nothing elaborate, just something I thought might be useful." Thea unwrapped the package to find a leather-bound planner embossed with her initials. Inside, Archer had noted important dates, Elliot's upcoming doctor appointments, a reminder about renewing her teaching certification, even Callum's birthday marked with a small star. "You mentioned wanting to get reorganized before considering returning to teaching," he explained, suddenly appearing uncertain. "I thought this might help track everything." The thoughtfulness of the gift, practical yet personal, embodied what had drawn them together. Not grand romantic gestures, but attentive care expressed through daily consideration. "It's perfect," she assured him, running her fingers over the supple leather. "Though I'm embarrassed I didn't realize the significance of today." "It's not really about the date," Archer clarified. "More about acknowledging that whatever this is between us, it matters. It's not temporary or transitional, at least not to me. His directness invited reciprocal honesty. Not to me either, Thea admitted, though I'm still trying to reconcile how quickly it developed. Sometimes I feel guilty for not grieving Callum longer before finding contentment again. I understand, Archer nodded. I've wondered if I dishonor Nora by moving forward so soon. But lately I've been thinking, perhaps the capacity to connect again so quickly speaks to the quality of love we experienced before. They taught us how to love deeply, how to build partnership. Those lessons didn't die with them. The perspective resonated deeply with Thea. Before she could respond, Elliot's morning babble alerted them to his awakening. As she lifted him from the bassinet, she noticed Archer watching them with unguarded affection. He's grown so much, he observed. Both of them have. Indeed, the infants who had brought them together as helpless newborns had developed distinct personalities over the past 3 months. Dahlia, now 16 weeks, had Nora's determined expression and Archer's contemplative gaze. Elliot had recently discovered his hands, staring in fascination at his fingers for extended periods. After breakfast, they migrated to the living room for what had become their morning ritual, spreading a blanket on the floor where both babies could practice tummy time. Archer and Thea sat on opposite sides, encouraging their respective children while maintaining conversation that flowed between practical matters and deeper reflections. I've been thinking about your teaching certification, Archer mentioned as he dangled a colorful toy above Dahlia. The elementary school will have openings for the fall semester. Miss Pendleton mentioned it when I ran into her at the hardware store. Thea looked up, surprised. You asked about teaching positions. I mentioned you were considering returning to work eventually, he clarified. She remembered you from district workshops, said you were brilliant with the youngest students. The compliment warmed Thea, though returning to teaching raised logistical questions she'd been avoiding. I'd need childcare for Elliot. We could work something out, Archer suggested casually, though his tone carried deeper implications. My schedule is flexible, and the playroom renovation will be finished by then. The reference to future arrangements, casually assumed rather than tentatively proposed, reflected how thoroughly entwined their lives had become. Thea had abandoned apartment hunting weeks ago, her possessions gradually migrating from the guest suite into shared spaces. Neither had formally acknowledged this evolution, yet both acted upon its reality daily. Their comfortable moment was interrupted by a distinctive sound from Elliot, a frustrated grunt followed by determined movement. Thea watched in astonishment as her son, previously content with limited mobility, suddenly pushed himself forward with unexpected strength. Not quite crawling, but deliberate movement with clear intention. Archer, look, she exclaimed, reaching for her phone to capture the milestone. But Elliot had other plans. Instead of continuing his forward momentum, he pivoted with surprising coordination and propelled himself toward Archer. Both adults watched in amazement as the baby determinedly inched across the blanket, his destination unmistakable. When Elliot reached Archer's knee, his tiny fingers grasping the fabric of his jeans, an extraordinary transformation crossed Archer's features. Wonder, followed by uncertainty. He glanced at Thea, clearly seeking permission for his emotional response to this significant moment. He likes you best in the mornings, Thea said softly, her voice thick with emotion. He associates you with breakfast and music. Permission granted. Archer gently lifted Elliot, settling him on his lap with natural ease. Hey there, adventurer, he murmured, voice rough with suppressed feeling. That was quite a journey. The simple interaction crystallized something Thea had been gradually acknowledging. Archer had become more than a housemate or friend to Elliot. He had become a consistent, loving presence in her son's life. The realization provoked neither jealousy nor guilt, but profound gratitude. He knows you're safe, she said, the simple truth resonating beyond the immediate moment. Their eyes met over the babies, unspoken understanding passing between them. Whatever labels society might apply to their relationship, they had become family in the ways that mattered most, through daily care, consistent presence, and genuine affection that extended to each other's children. That night, for the first time, Thea didn't return to the guest suite that had been her sanctuary for months. Instead, she followed Archer to his bedroom, their newfound intimacy extending naturally to sharing this most private space. As they lay together, not yet ready for physical intimacy, but craving the comfort of closeness, Thea realized how completely their lives had intertwined. As she drifted towards sleep, her phone buzzed with a text from Marguerite, the first contact since their confrontation 3 months earlier. The message was brief but consequential. "I've consulted with my attorney about grandparental rights to Elliot. We should discuss this formally." The cold words shattered the warmth of the evening's connection. Thea's hand trembled as she set down the phone, unwilling to contaminate this peaceful moment with Marguerite's hostility. But Archer, ever attentive, had noticed her distress. "What is it?" he asked, propping himself on one elbow. She showed him the message wordlessly. His expression hardened as he read it, protective instinct visible in the set of his jaw. "She can't just take him," he stated firmly, handing back the phone. "You're his mother." "But she has resources I don't," Thea replied, voicing her deepest fear. "Money, connections, legal teams. And if she presents our living arrangement as evidence of instability or moral failing—" "Then we'll face it together," Archer interrupted, his voice steady with certainty. "Whatever she throws at us, we'll handle it as a united front." The simple declaration, "we," rather than "you," conveyed commitment deeper than their tentative romantic exploration. Archer was offering not just emotional support, but partnership in the challenges ahead. Chapter 8: Legal Battles. A petition for grandparental visitation rights. Thea stared at the legal documents spread across the kitchen island, her voice barely above a whisper. The formal letterhead of Harrington and Associates, Marguerite's attorneys, seemed to mock her with its embossed gold lettering and imposing language. Archer stood beside her, scanning the petition with narrowed eyes. "This is more than visitation," he observed, pointing to a highlighted section. "She's requesting partial custody every other weekend plus 2 weeknights. She's claiming I'm emotionally unstable," Thea's voice broke as she read further. "That my hasty cohabitation demonstrates impaired judgment and moral failing detrimental to Elliot's development." The clinical assessment of her grief and subsequent choices felt like a physical blow. "We knew this was coming," Archer reminded her, his hand finding hers beneath the counter. "We've already spoken to Catherine about representation." Catherine Whitman, a family law attorney Archer had worked with on a renovation project, had agreed to meet them later that day. She'd been cautiously optimistic during their initial phone consultation, though she hadn't yet seen the full petition. "What if she's right?" Thea voiced her deepest fear. "What if moving in with you so quickly really was irresponsible? What if a judge agrees?" "Look at me," Archer said firmly, waiting until Thea met his gaze. "What we've created here is stable, loving, and healthy for both Elliot and Dahlia. Any objective observer would see that." His certainty steadied her, though the weight of Marguerite's accusations still pressed heavily. They'd been expecting legal action since the threatening text 3 weeks earlier, but the reality of formal proceedings felt significantly more threatening than the anticipation had been. Catherine's office occupied the second floor of a converted Victorian near the courthouse. The attorney herself defied Thea's expectations, a woman in her early 50s with a streak of purple in her gray bob and chunky artisanal jewelry that clinked softly as she reviewed the petition. "Marguerite has engaged Preston Harrington," Catherine noted, tapping the signature at the bottom of the document. "Aggressive, traditional, expensive, loves cases that allow him to make moral pronouncements from his self-constructed pedestal." "Is that bad for us?" Thea asked, anxiety sharpening her tone. Catherine considered the question thoughtfully. "It means they'll leverage conservative family values and traditional timelines for grief and relationship development. They'll frame your living arrangement as impulsive and potentially harmful to Elliot." She set down the petition. "But their position has significant weaknesses, primarily that Marguerite has no history of consistent involvement in Elliot's life before making this claim." "She kicked Thea out the day of her son's funeral," Archer interjected, indignation coloring his words. "Literally put her belongings on the porch and forced her and Elliot onto the street." "Which is precisely the kind of detail that undermines her claim of concern for Elliot's welfare," Catherine replied with a satisfied nod. "Judges tend to be skeptical of grandparents who suddenly develop passionate interest in grandchildren they previously showed little concern for." The meeting continued with Catherine outlining their strategy, emphasizing the stable home environment Thea and Archer had created, documenting Marguerite's previous rejection, and presenting their relationship as a thoughtful partnership between grieving parents rather than an impulsive romance. "Should we downplay our personal relationship?" Thea asked hesitantly. "Focus solely on the practical aspects of our living arrangement." Catherine's expression softened with understanding. "Authenticity matters more than conforming to arbitrary timelines. If your relationship has developed romantic elements, acknowledge that while emphasizing how it enhances rather than detracts from the stability you provide for both children." As they left the office, Archer took Thea's hand, anchoring her against the swirling uncertainty the petition had unleashed. "We'll get through this," he promised. "Together." The word "together" had acquired layers of meaning over their 4 months of shared life: practical partnership, emotional support, and increasingly romantic commitment. Though they'd moved cautiously in physical intimacy, their emotional connection had deepened with surprising speed. The following weeks brought a flurry of preparations for the preliminary hearing. Catherine helped them document the progression of their relationship, emphasizing the paralleled timing of their losses, the practical considerations that initiated their living arrangement, and the deliberately thoughtful pace of their personal involvement. Simultaneously, they received sworn statements from the pediatrician attesting to Elliot's excellent health and development, character references from colleagues at the music school where Thea had begun teaching part-time, and a brief but significant letter from Richard Winters, Nora's father, confirming his support of Archer and Thea's relationship as beneficial to his granddaughter. The night before the hearing, after settling both babies, Thea found Archer in his studio reviewing their documentation one final time. His focused determination had been her lifeline during the legal preparations, his unwavering belief in their family unit sustaining her through moments of doubt. "Catherine thinks we're well positioned," she said, perching on the edge of his drafting table. "But I keep thinking about facing Marguerite across the courtroom tomorrow." Archer set aside the papers, giving her his full attention. "Whatever happens in that courtroom, we face it as a united front. Marguerite can challenge our choices, but she can't undermine what we've built here unless we allow doubt to separate us." His certainty reflected the evolution of their relationship, from tentative allies in grief to committed partners. Over 4 months, they had constructed something neither had imagined possible in those early days of devastating loss. A blended family built on mutual understanding, shared purpose, and deepening love. "I never expected to fight for the right to build a new life so soon after losing Callum," Thea admitted. "Part of me still questions if we moved too quickly." "The conventional timelines for grief are arbitrary," Archer replied, echoing Catherine's earlier assurance. "What matters is that we've been thoughtful and honest every step of the way, with ourselves, with each other, and with the memory of those we lost." His perspective, as always, provided solid ground beneath her feet. Thea leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his in a gesture that had become their unique form of intimate connection. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she whispered, "know that I wouldn't change our path, even with all its complications. You and Dahlia have become essential to Elliot and me." Archer's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. "You gave us back our future when all I could see was loss," he murmured. "Whatever judgment Marguerite or the courts might pass, that gift remains undiminished." Morning arrived with crisp winter sunshine that belied the tension gripping both households. They dressed with careful attention, conservative clothing that projected stability without appearing manufactured for the occasion. Victoria arrived to care for both babies, her support unexpectedly strengthened by the legal challenge they faced. The courthouse loomed impressive against the clear blue sky, its stone facade a visual representation of the institutional authority about to evaluate their unconventional family. Inside, Catherine met them with confident professionalism, briefing them on procedural details while they waited for their case to be called. Marguerite arrived flanked by Preston Harrington and a younger associate, her elegance weaponized in a tailored suit that screamed old money and established propriety. Her gaze skimmed over Thea with dismissive assessment before landing on Archer with narrow disapproval. "Thea," she acknowledged stiffly, social training apparently preventing her from ignoring her former daughter-in-law completely. "Marguerite," Thea replied, finding unexpected strength in Archer's steady presence beside her. "I wish we could have discussed this without legal intervention." "Some matters require formal structure," Marguerite responded, her tone suggesting Thea was naive to think otherwise. "Elliot's future is too important for casual arrangements." Before Thea could respond, they were called into the courtroom. Judge Elena Cortez, a woman in her 60s with penetrating dark eyes and salt and pepper hair pulled into a severe bun, presided over the hearing with efficient authority. The proceedings began with opening statements from both attorneys. Preston Harrington presented Marguerite as a grieving mother concerned about her grandson's welfare, painting Thea's living arrangement as evidence of emotional instability and questionable judgment. Mrs. Marlowe seeks only to ensure her grandson maintains connection with his paternal heritage, Harrington concluded with practiced sincerity, and to provide stability during a period when his mother appears to be making impulsive decisions driven by grief rather than careful consideration of Elliot's needs. Catherine's response was measured but pointed, emphasizing Marguerite's rejection of both Thea and Elliot immediately following Callum's death. "If Mrs. Marlowe truly prioritized her grandson's welfare, Your Honor, she might have offered support rather than eviction during the most vulnerable period of both their lives." The factual timeline that followed revealed the stark contrast between Marguerite's current claims of concern and her previous actions. When Catherine introduced documentation of Thea's eviction, including text messages from Marguerite explicitly blaming Thea for Callum's death, a subtle shift occurred in Judge Cortez's expression. Marguerite took the stand first, presenting a carefully curated version of events that minimized her initial rejection, while emphasizing her subsequent concern about Thea's living situation. Under Catherine's cross-examination, however, cracks appeared in her composed facade. "Did you offer Mrs. Marlowe and your grandson any financial support after asking them to leave your home?" Catherine asked. "Thea received rental income from the cottage," Marguerite replied stiffly. "She wasn't destitute." "That wasn't my question," Catherine persisted. "Did you, personally, offer any assistance to your grandson and his mother after insisting they vacate your home immediately following your son's funeral?" Marguerite's hesitation spoke volumes. "I was grieving," she finally said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Perhaps I could have managed the situation more delicately. Yet now, 4 months later, you're requesting court-mandated access to the grandson you previously rejected." Catherine observed. "What changed, Mrs. Marlowe?" "I learned she had moved in with a man she barely knew," Marguerite replied, righteous indignation temporarily overshadowing her carefully maintained composure. "While still claiming to mourn my son? What kind of example does that set for Elliot?" The raw accusation hung in the courtroom air, its emotional impact temporarily silencing even Catherine. Judge Cortez's gaze shifted between Marguerite and Thea, assessing both women with clinical detachment. When Thea took the stand, she felt momentarily overwhelmed by Marguerite's evident disdain. Then her eyes found Archer in the gallery, his steady presence reminding her of the family they had built from parallel tragedy. Strength flowed from that connection, allowing her to speak with quiet conviction about their journey. "I loved Callum deeply," she testified, meeting Marguerite's gaze directly. "His death shattered the future we had planned together. When Archer offered shelter after Marguerite asked us to leave, it was an act of kindness between two people experiencing identical loss, not romance or replacement." Preston Harrington's cross-examination aimed to characterize their relationship as inappropriately hasty, but Thea maintained composed honesty. "Grief doesn't follow conventional timelines," she explained. "Neither does healing. Archer and I built connection through shared understanding of loss that others couldn't comprehend. That foundation has benefited both Elliot and Dahlia immeasurably." Archer's testimony followed, his architectural precision bringing clarity to their complex situation. He detailed Dahlia's improved development in Thea's presence, the consistent routines they'd established for both children, and the careful steps they'd taken to honor Callum and Nora's memories while building a new family structure. "We've created memory boxes for both children," he explained, his composure momentarily wavering as he described this project, "filled with photographs, letters, and mementos to ensure they know their other parents as people, not just absences." Thea's commitment to preserving Callum's memory for Elliot has been unwavering. Judge Cortez's penetrating questions suggested genuine engagement with the complexities of their situation rather than reflexive judgment based on conventional timelines. When testimony concluded, she announced a brief recess before issuing her preliminary ruling. In the courthouse hallway, Catherine appeared cautiously optimistic. "Judge Cortez is fair but traditional," she advised. "However, Marguerite's admission about evicting you undermines her claim of consistent concern for Elliot." Preston Harrington approached with professional courtesy, masking obvious strategic intent. "My client would consider a compromise," he offered. "Regular visitation without overnight stays, supervised initially to rebuild the relationship gradually." The offer, more reasonable than their original petition, suggested Marguerite recognized weaknesses in her position. Before Thea could respond, Archer interjected with calm authority. "We've never opposed appropriate visitation," he stated. "We object to the claim that our household is somehow detrimental to Elliot's well-being." Harrington's expression revealed calculating assessment. "Perhaps we've been operating from misunderstanding rather than fundamental disagreement," he suggested smoothly. "My client deeply misses her connection to her grandson and late son." The strategically employed vulnerability, equating access to Elliot with connection to Callum, struck Thea with unexpected empathy. Despite Marguerite's cruelty during her most vulnerable moment, Thea recognized the older woman's grief as genuine, if poorly expressed. When Judge Cortez recalled them, her ruling reflected nuanced understanding of all perspectives. She granted Marguerite limited visitation rights, Sunday afternoons twice monthly, gradually increasing as Elliot became comfortable, while firmly rejecting claims that Thea's living arrangement demonstrated parental deficiency. "Grief follows no standardized timeline," Judge Cortez noted, echoing Thea's earlier testimony. "The court finds that Mrs. Marlowe has created a stable, nurturing environment for her son, despite extraordinary challenges." Mr. Reed's household appears to provide consistent support beneficial to Elliot's development. The mixed victory left both parties with partial satisfaction. As they gathered their documents, Thea noticed Marguerite standing alone, her earlier entourage dispersed to handle procedural details. Without premeditation, Thea approached her former mother-in-law. "I never intended to separate you from Elliot," she said quietly. "He deserves to know his father's family." Marguerite's expression remained guarded, though something flickered beneath her composed surface. Perhaps recognition that their shared connection to Callum constituted a permanent, if complicated, relationship. "He has Callum's smile," she observed after a moment, the simple acknowledgement more revealing than her carefully crafted testimony had been. "Yes," Thea agreed, unexpected tears threatening her composure. "And his curiosity. He examines everything with such concentration." The brief moment of shared recognition didn't resolve their fundamental differences, but established tentative common ground. As they parted without further conversation, Thea sensed a subtle shift. Not reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of mutual accommodation for Elliot's benefit. Outside the courthouse, Archer waited with patient attention. When Thea reached him, he enfolded her in a protective embrace that conveyed support without words. "You were magnificent," he murmured against her hair. "Honest and dignified despite everything." "It's not over," Thea reminded him, drawing strength from his steady presence. "This is just the beginning of navigating Marguerite's involvement." "True," Archer acknowledged, "but we've established our foundation. Whatever challenges she presents moving forward, we face them together." Chapter 9. Healing Together. The late winter sun cast long shadows across the kitchen as Thea prepared Sunday breakfast, her movements accompanied by Elliot's babbling from his high chair. At 6 months, he had developed an extensive vocabulary of sounds that filled the previously quiet house with joyful noise. Dahlia, 2 weeks younger but seemingly determined to keep pace, responded with her own melodic coos from her seat beside him. "They're having quite the conversation," Archer observed, entering with freshly folded laundry. The domestic tableau, pancake batter mixed in the large ceramic bowl, freshly cut fruit arranged on a platter, 2 infants communicating in their private language, represented normality that had seemed impossible 5 months earlier. "Apparently, Elliot has strong opinions about bananas," Thea replied with a smile, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. "Dahlia seems unconvinced by his argument." Archer set down the laundry basket and moved behind Thea, his arms encircling her waist as he rested his chin on her shoulder. These casual intimacies had become part of their daily rhythm, physical affection developing alongside emotional connection with deliberate care. "Marguerite arrives at 1, he reminded her gently. "Do you want me to take Dahlia to the park during her visit?" Thea considered the offer, appreciative but determined to normalize these bi-weekly visits. "No, I think it's important for her to see our family as it actually functions. No more pretense." The preliminary custody hearing 2 months earlier had established a fragile truce with Marguerite, supervised visitation that gradually expanded as she demonstrated consistent involvement rather than sporadic interest. These visits remained tense, but Marguerite's genuine attachment to Elliot had begun to transcend her disapproval of Thea's choices. "Besides," Thea continued, turning in Archer's embrace to face him, "you promised to finish the playroom shelving today. Those toy baskets won't organize themselves." Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Too early for Marguerite's scheduled visit. Archer released Thea reluctantly and went to answer, returning moments later with unexpected guests. Eleanor and Richard Winters, Nora's parents, who had gradually warmed to their unorthodox family arrangement. "We were in the area for Richard's medical appointment," Eleanor explained, her attention immediately captured by Dahlia's enthusiastic greeting. "We hoped we might steal a few minutes with our granddaughter." "You're always welcome," Archer assured them, his genuine welcome reflecting the improved relationship that had developed since their initial disapproval. "We're just having breakfast if you'd like to join us." As they settled around the table, the dynamics of their blended family were on full display. Thea serving pancakes to Nora's parents, while Archer helped Elliot with small pieces of fruit. The scene that might once have seemed impossible had become their normal, acceptance gradually replacing judgment as both sets of grandparents witnessed the stability and love permeating the household. Archer divided his time between caring for Dahlia and managing his architectural practice from the home studio, carefully balancing client meetings with family responsibilities. His current project, restoring a historic downtown building, had gained attention from a prestigious design magazine, bringing new commissions despite his reduced schedule. Conversation flowed easily until Eleanor mentioned their encounter with Marguerite Marlowe at their hotel restaurant the previous evening. "She seemed quite interested when we mentioned our visit today," Eleanor noted with careful neutrality. "Asked several questions about your arrangement." Thea and Archer exchanged concerned glances. Though Marguerite had adhered to the visitation schedule established by the court, her disapproval remained evident in subtle comments and pointed questions during each visit. "Did she seem upset about something specific?" Thea asked, maintaining a casual tone despite her concern. "Not upset," Richard clarified, his typically reserved manner softening as Dahlia grabbed his finger with surprising strength. "More investigative. Mentioned something about discussing mutual interests." The cryptic statement hung in the air as breakfast concluded. After the Winters departed with promises to return the following weekend, Thea voiced the concern that had been building since their revelation. "What do you think Marguerite is planning?" she asked as they cleared the table together, the babies contently playing in their adjacent activity centers. "I'm not sure," Archer admitted, his expression thoughtful. "But Catherine mentioned Marguerite requested additional documents about our household arrangement last week. She might be building toward another custody challenge." The possibility sent a familiar anxiety through Thea, the fear that their hard-won stability remained vulnerable to external judgment and legal intervention. Before she could respond, the doorbell announced Marguerite's precisely punctual arrival. Thea opened the door with practiced composure, greeting her former mother-in-law with polite civility. Marguerite entered with characteristic elegance, her designer outfit and perfect coiffure contrasting with the comfortable domesticity of the household. Her gaze swept the living area with assessing precision before landing on Elliot. "There's my handsome boy," she crooned, her severe features softening as she approached him. Elliot, now familiar with her regular visits, offered a hesitant smile that Thea noted contained traces of Callum's dimpled grin. The scheduled visit proceeded with established routine. Marguerite engaged with Elliot while Thea remained nearby, their interaction cordial but guarded. The unexpected deviation occurred when Archer entered with Dahlia after changing her diaper. "Mr. Reed," Marguerite acknowledged with unusual directness, "might I have a word with you? Privately." The request, unprecedented during her previous visits, caused Thea instant concern. Archer's questioning glance received her subtle nod, better to understand whatever Marguerite was planning than remain in uncertainty. As they moved to Archer's study, Thea distracted herself with Elliot's increasingly mobile exploration, though her attention remained divided. When they returned 15 minutes later, Archer's expression revealed nothing, while Marguerite appeared surprisingly subdued. The remainder of the visit continued without reference to their private conversation, though Thea noticed a shift in Marguerite's demeanor. Less rigid disapproval, more contemplative observation of the household dynamics. When she departed, her goodbye to Elliot seemed particularly emotional, her typically composed features momentarily vulnerable. The moment the door closed behind Marguerite, Thea turned to Archer with undisguised concern. "What happened in that conversation?" Archer's response surprised her completely. She wanted to know if I intend to marry you. The blunt statement momentarily robbed Thea of response. Marriage was a topic they had deliberately avoided, both still wearing wedding rings from their previous unions, both cautious about formalizing a relationship born in such unconventional circumstances. "What did you tell her?" Thea finally asked, heart racing unexpectedly. "The truth," Archer replied simply, "that we're committed to our family but haven't discussed legal formalization, that we're focused on creating stability for the children rather than conforming to external expectations about relationship timelines." His answer, diplomatic yet honest, reflected their carefully considered approach to building life after devastating loss. How did she respond to that? With surprising thoughtfulness, Archer admitted, settling beside her on the sofa as both babies played on their activity mat. She said something that actually made sense, that public perception will eventually affect the children, regardless of our personal feelings about social conventions. The observation, coming from Marguerite, carried unexpected wisdom beneath its judgment. Their unconventional household, however functional and loving, existed within a social context that would eventually impact Elliot and Dahlia as they grew older and more aware. She also said something else, Archer continued, his expression softening, that Callum would have wanted you to be happy, even in his absence, that while she struggles with the timeline, she recognizes that our household provides Elliot with stability and love. The acknowledgement, however reluctantly given, represented significant evolution in Marguerite's perspective, from outright rejection to tentative acceptance of their family configuration. What changed? Thea wondered aloud. She's been so adamantly opposed to our relationship from the beginning. I think her conversation with the Winters affected her more than we realized, Archer suggested. Eleanor mentioned they discussed their initial reactions to our arrangement and how witnessing the household functioning changed their perspective. The possibility that the two sets of grandparents had found common ground in their shared concerns and perhaps shared eventual acceptance presented an unexpected pathway toward extended family harmony none of them had anticipated. That evening, after settling both babies, Thea and Archer retreated to the back porch with cups of tea, watching the stars emerge in the clear spring sky. Their conversation returned to Marguerite's pointed question about marriage. "We haven't talked about it," Thea acknowledged, curling her feet beneath her on the porch swing. "Marriage, I mean." "No," Archer agreed, his thoughtful gaze on the emerging constellations. "I think we've both been avoiding the topic." The admission created space for honest exploration of a subject they'd carefully circumnavigated. "Part of me feels it's too soon," Thea confessed, "that formalizing our relationship somehow diminishes what we had with Callum and Nora." "I understand," Archer replied, his hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. "I still introduce myself as Nora's husband sometimes when meeting new clients. The identity became so fundamental that relinquishing it feels like another loss." The simple acknowledgement of their complex emotional landscape created intimacy deeper than physical connection. They sat in comfortable silence, the porch swing moving gently beneath them, until Archer spoke again. "But I've been thinking lately that perhaps marriage isn't about replacing what we lost, but honoring what we've found, this unexpected family that helps us all heal." The perspective resonated with Thea's evolving understanding of their relationship, not a replacement for what death had stolen, but something new built from shared understanding of profound loss. "I don't need legal documentation to know what we are to each other," she said softly. But Marguerite raised a valid point about the children. As they grow older, having clarity about our family structure would provide security. Archer turned to face her directly, moonlight illuminating his serious expression. "I'm not proposing. Not tonight. Not like this," he clarified. "When that conversation happens, it should be solely about us, not external expectations or legal considerations. The distinction mattered. Their relationship deserved deliberate care rather than reactive formalization. Agreed, Thea replied, leaning against his shoulder as they continued their gentle swinging. We've never taken the conventional path anyway. No, Archer agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Our story began in a cemetery in the rain. Traditional timelines were never our destiny. The following Sunday brought unexpected development. Marguerite arrived for her scheduled visit, accompanied by Eleanor Winters, the two grandmothers having apparently formed tentative alliance through their shared interest in their grandchildren's welfare. We thought perhaps a joint activity might be beneficial for everyone, Eleanor explained, producing a photo album dedicated to cataloging both babies' development. A visual history for Elliot and Dahlia to share as they grow up together. The gesture, clearly planned between them, represented bridge building none of them had anticipated. As the afternoon progressed, Thea observed Marguerite gradually relaxing her rigid disapproval, engaging with both babies while sharing stories about Callum's childhood with evident emotional openness. When the grandmothers departed together, making plans for their next joint visit, Archer wrapped his arm around Thea's shoulders. I believe we just witnessed a minor miracle, he observed with quiet amazement. Not a miracle, Thea corrected gently. Just healing beginning to spread beyond our immediate family circle. Grief connecting rather than isolating. Their shared understanding of this subtle but significant shift exemplified what had drawn them together initially. The capacity to recognize healing within pain, connection within loss, and possibility within devastation. That night, as they moved through their evening routine, Archer paused while organizing the kitchen. I've been thinking about what you said regarding the children's sense of security, he began, unusually hesitant, about formalizing our family structure eventually. Thea looked up from the baby bottles she was preparing for morning, attention captured by his serious tone. I'd like to adopt Elliot, he continued carefully, and for you to adopt Dahlia. Not immediately, but when the time feels right. Legal recognition of the parental roles we're already fulfilling. The proposal, more significant than marriage in many ways, acknowledged the profound bonds that had developed between each of them and the other's child. Thea considered how naturally Elliot reached for Archer each morning, how instinctively she responded to Dahlia's particular cry in the night. Yes, she agreed without hesitation, the rightness of this evolution immediately apparent. They deserve that security, the knowledge that they're fully claimed by both of us, regardless of biological connection. As they sealed this profound commitment with a gentle kiss, their embraced future felt not like replacement of what they'd lost, but transformation of parallel tragedies into unexpected joy. A family forged in shared grief that had somehow found its way to genuine wholeness. Chapter 10. Full Circle. The garden exploded with spring blossoms, fruit trees dotting the landscape with white and pink flowers that drifted like snow in the gentle breeze. 1 year had passed since Thea and Archer's chance meeting in the cemetery, a year of profound transformation neither could have imagined during those first raw days of grief. Thea stood on the back porch, watching Archer install the final piece of playground equipment they'd designed together, a toddler swing set with seats for both Elliot and Dahlia, who were now pulling themselves up and taking tentative steps with increasing confidence. Perfect timing, Archer called, securing the last bolt. They'll be ready for these by summer. His foresight, always planning for the children's developmental milestones, was among the countless qualities that had endeared him to Thea over their months together. They had settled into partnership with surprising ease, their complementary strengths creating stability neither had thought possible after such devastating losses. As Archer crossed the garden toward her, Thea felt the familiar flutter of appreciation that had evolved from gratitude to friendship to love. Their relationship had developed with deliberate care, each step forward taken with conscious awareness of the grief that had connected them initially. "The Winters confirmed for dinner tonight," she informed him as he climbed the porch steps. And Marguerite asked if she could bring her famous chocolate mousse. "Miracles never cease," Archer replied with a small smile, brushing dirt from his hands. The gradual thawing between their respective in-laws had been among the most unexpected developments of recent months. Tentative alliance built on shared interest in their grandchildren's welfare. Inside, both babies napped peacefully, their synchronized schedule a hard-won victory that provided precious quiet moments in otherwise bustling days. Thea and Archer settled at the kitchen island with coffee, reviewing plans for the memorial garden they'd designed together. "The landscape crew starts Monday," Archer confirmed, spreading blueprints across the counter. The project, transforming the far corner of their property into a peaceful garden dedicated to Callum and Nora, represented their commitment to honoring what came before while building something new. "I think they would approve," Thea said softly, tracing the outline of the circular design featuring plants significant to both their late spouses. Wildflowers for Nora's conservation work, rare botanical specimens for Callum's literary interests. "They would," Archer agreed, his hand covering hers atop the plans. "Not just of the garden, but of everything we've created together." The assertion reflected their evolving perspective on grief and healing, that moving forward honored rather than betrayed their previous loves, that building new joy didn't diminish past happiness. Their quiet moment was interrupted by simultaneous cries through the baby monitor. With synchronized movements born of months of co-parenting, they rose together, dividing responsibilities without discussion. Archer to prepare bottles, while Thea retrieved the babies from their cribs. Later, as afternoon sun bathed the living room in golden light, they sat on the floor watching Elliot and Dahlia explore their surroundings with increasing mobility and curiosity. Dahlia had developed Nora's determined focus, examining objects with intense concentration before methodically testing their properties. Elliot, true to Callum's legacy, approached the world with enthusiastic energy, more interested in overall experience than specific details. "1 year ago today," Archer noted, breaking their comfortable silence, "we met in the cemetery." The anniversary had occupied Thea's thoughts throughout the day, how profoundly their lives had transformed since that rain-soaked encounter between two devastated new parents. From parallel tragedy to intertwined healing, their journey defied conventional timelines, yet felt undeniably right. "I've been thinking about appropriate commemoration," Thea admitted. "It seems wrong to celebrate the anniversary of meeting at our spouses' graves, yet what's grown from that moment deserves acknowledgement." Archer reached for her hand, his expression thoughtful. "Perhaps we visit them first, honor where our journey began, then celebrate where it's brought us." The suggestion perfectly captured their approach to building new life amid grief, not erasing what came before, but integrating loss into a narrative that included both sorrow and joy, endings and beginnings. That evening, after settling the babies with Victoria's capable assistance, they returned to Oakwood Cemetery as golden hour cast long shadows across the grounds. The parallel graves that had once represented unbearable loss now existed as sacred markers of lives deeply loved rather than sources of active pain. They stood together between the headstones, each placing fresh flowers, wildflowers for Nora, literary roses for Callum, in simple acknowledgement of continued remembrance. No words were necessary between them. Their shared understanding transcended verbal expression. "They brought us together," Thea said finally, her voice steady despite the emotion of the moment. "In the most unexpected way, their absence created space for us to find each other." "Not replacement," Archer added, completing her thought as he often did, "but continuation. Different love, equally valid." As they walked hand in hand from the cemetery toward the restaurant where they'd planned dinner, Thea noticed the contrast between this visit and their